I feel like everything I do really comes back to helping people be the best version of themselves. And I really like the term optimize your human performance because it always continues to allow ourselves to push forward, right? There's never a destination. There's never somewhere to get to. We can always be better in certain areas of our life. And maybe we focus on one thing for a while and then we focus on another thing in a different season. But I think if we can keep that foundational belief and drive towards being our best, then it's obviously no guarantee that it'll happen, right? But we give ourselves the best chance of living a healthy life.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I appreciate you being here today. Today, we're having a great conversation with Maggi Fitzpatrick. Maggi is a health and wellness coach who's here today to help inspire people to live the best lives they can possibly live. When we think about the lives that we live day to day, our everyday routines, a lot of times they're not the most optimal. And Maggi's here today to have conversations about what it means to incorporate practices into our lives that help us live more mindfully and more holistically. This is a very inspirational conversation, so I want to thank her for her time today. And I want to thank you for listening. Let me know what you think about this podcast episode, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you. Maggi, thank you for being on the Stories by Joe podcast today. I appreciate you being here. How you doing today?
I'm great. I'm really excited for this. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad that we're finally here now, and we're able to have this conversation. So I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
With all my podcast guests, the first thing I ask them is if they could just tell me a little bit about who they are, where they're from, and what they do. Can you explain to me a little bit about that with yourself?
I think the main word that describes me best is coach. I coach a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And I think that's kind of like the through line between who I am in my work anyway. But also I find that it comes up a lot outside of work as well. Like I feel like I tend to be a guide or someone who can offer advice or guidance to people in my personal life as well. So I would say that probably best describes who I am. I am from a tiny little town in Sullivan County, New York called Parksville, and I grew up there my whole life. And I went to a tiny school, and I have one sister and grew up with my mom and dad until my dad passed away when he was 16. I still live pretty close to where I grew up. I'm now married to my wonderful husband, Cosmos, and we like to live here near our family and near all of our work and whatnot. But yeah, these days, I find that most of what I'm doing is coaching.
Coaching, being a guide, that's a very ambitious undertaking. Actually, having the life skills and trying to apply them and being an example for other people and trying to help organize other people's lives. How did you get started with the interest in being a coach?
I was always really interested in sports when I was younger, played soccer, basketball, and softball every year of my whole life. And I continued playing soccer and basketball into college as well. And so being active was always something that was a huge part of my life. But I didn't know that there was a way that I could do that other than being like a physical education teacher in school, right? That was the only type of model of any sort of coaching that I had ever seen. And so I never really consciously or intentionally thought about becoming a coach when I was younger. But being active was always really important to me. But then there was this other side of my story, which was my dad's story. And he became sick when I was in about 5th grade, I think, when he first started dealing with a lot of heart health issues. And from fifth grade all the way through my senior year, it was constantly him in the hospital dealing with different sorts of illnesses. I think he had 4 or 5 heart attacks before the one that he passed away from. He had a stroke. He had many stents placed. He was on all sorts of different medications, and within a couple of years, he was unable to work anymore, and that really put a strain on our family. And so I watched him go through this, and it kind of put me in a perspective and in a place of recognizing that I didn't ever want that for myself. And I also didn't want anyone else to experience what I had experienced from like the side of being a child, right? And having their parent go through something like that. So the intersection of those two things, athletics and my dad's story, kind of came together when I was in college. So I went to college undecided. I didn't know what I wanted to study. And so my first semester, I took just kind of a bunch of random gen ed classes. And then when I was home for winter break, my high school basketball coach called me and he said, "I got you a job at school if you want it." And I was like, "Doing what?" Like, what? Thank you. I'm really excited about that, but doing what? And he was like, "Oh, you can be a manager for the men's basketball team. The assistant coach is my friend. Like, he grew up in the next town over from us. And I told him about you and that you go to school there and they said they were looking for people to help with the team. So if you want to go for an interview and you get back, you can see if you'd be a good fit." And I was so excited. I did not know that that was a possibility at all. And so when I got back to school, I met with the coaches and it worked out. And I ended up working with that team for the entirety of the time that I was in college. And that was the first introduction to coaching outside of being a gym teacher. And that was really the first way I was able to see that, oh, I could study this thing called exercise science and I can help people be healthier, or I could help coach sports teams, or I could help coach people in all of these sorts of different ways. And it introduced me to this whole new world that I had never seen before. And there's a whole exercise science college where I went to school at Ithaca College, and there's a whole like school within the college dedicated to exercise science, but I didn't really know anything about it because it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't something that no one had ever told me about it. I'd never come across it. Like, I didn't know that this was a thing. So that was really when those two parts of my life came together for me, because I realized that I could go to school for this. I could study this. I can help people in different ways, whether it's their health and their heart health and making sure that they're not the ones suffering from heart attacks, hopefully, or it's athletes and helping them perform to their best level. So that was where that initially happened for me. And then I've basically just done it all since then.
You're from small town, upstate New York in the Catskills. How does that play a role in your trajectory in becoming a coach? You end up going back to the Catskills. Am I right with that?
Yeah. Yep. You are.
Yeah. So what happens at that point? It's a small town, Parksville. How were you able to apply your coaching skills in the area that you lived?
I never anticipated doing anything close to where I grew up. It just wasn't something that had crossed my mind, because we were always told, like, go live somewhere else, go do something else. Like, there's going to be more opportunity for you elsewhere. And so that was my mindset all of the time, was like, I have to get out of here or else I'm not going to be successful. And so after college, first I moved to Cleveland and I did my internship there at the Cleveland Clinic, working in cardiac rehabilitation. So I was working with patients coming out of open heart surgery or stents or whatever type of surgery or procedure that they were having. And then from there, I moved to Elmira and I was in charge of program design and sales for 5 different gyms. And that was the place where I really started to figure out what was important to me in terms of health and how I help people and what forms of health were important to me, and my training style and my coaching style and all of that really got developed there. And then from there, I moved to Danbury, and I was a head coach at a gym there. Same thing, doing a lot of program design, a lot of coaching, working with a lot of clients. And then from there, I kind of moved back home. And at that point, I did not actually want to do any coaching or anything in fitness anymore because I had had not the best experiences working in those gyms. And I thought that it wasn't for me. And so I came back home and I looked for something else. And that led me to commuting to New York City every day. And I worked for a global technology company doing sales. So I commuted to Manhattan every day and I sold room and desk booking software. And I did that for about 8 months. And in that time of commuting back and forth, I was on the train a lot. I started listening to podcasts, reading books. I really started getting into personal development. That was a side of fitness that I had dabbled into a little bit before, but not really extensively. And since I had about 4 hours a day to myself during this commute, I started to get into podcasts and reading different types of books and whatnot. And that's when I started to learn about more of the mental side of coaching and performance and how to be your best self, not just physically with your body, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually as well. And it was at that point, while I was commuting to that job, that I decided that I actually really did like coaching and I really did like fitness and I really did like helping people. And I wanted to do it in my own business. I didn't want to have to work for someone else and fulfill their vision, but I wanted to have my own business and be able to fulfill my own vision. And so I left that job in the city and I opened my company, which is called Callow Fitness. And I've been doing that for almost 6 years now. And that has led to lots of different types of things. But bringing it back to where I grew up, I ended up doing a lot of different work in the community around here. I currently am a weekly writer for our local paper. I have a column, it's called Moving Toward Health, and I've been doing that for about 2 years. And every week we talk about a different topic. I also have a weekly segment on the local radio. And the last 4 years, I coached high school girls varsity soccer and basketball in the school that I went to high school in. So it's kind of a crazy full circle, honestly, that I never could have expected. But coming back home and doing this work here, I think has been the most fulfilling to me because I'm able to help people there couldn't be a more similar situation to how I grew up than to do the work here in the place that I grew up. And I think that that is something that I never would have been able to experience somewhere else.
Maggie, how old are you?
I'm 29. I feel like I've lived 50 lives already.
Yeah, just by everything you explained, all the roles you've had, all the jobs you've had, all the places you've been, that's a pretty amazing life so far. That you're 29 years old and you've done all those things and been to all those places. That's incredible, and it makes me think: what fuels you? What drives you forward in life to give you the inspiration to go ahead and do all these things?
This is such a good question. This is something I was asked this recently, actually, and it forced me to think about it because I feel like this is one of those questions that's easy to avoid or not really know the answer to. You just kind of keep doing the things, but you don't really know why. So I feel like there's a couple things for me. One, I'm very competitive. I am very competitive, which because we did our strength finders together and it's top 5 on my strength finders. And that is something I think that fuels me across the board because I love to win and I always want to win. So no matter what it is that I'm committed to, that is kind of like the fuel that keeps me going. But then how I point that in the right direction comes down more towards me wanting people to be healthy and live healthy lives. And I really think it goes back to my childhood and the life that my dad lived, and watching him not take care of himself as good as he could have, but also then wishing that he did. Like, he spent a lot of time, I think, being regretful of the health choices that he didn't make. And I don't I just want to help as many people as possible not be in that situation for themselves or for their loved ones. And I feel like everything I do really comes back to helping people be the best version of themselves. And I really like the term optimize your human performance, because it it always continues to allow ourselves to push forward, right? There's never a destination, there's never somewhere to get to. We can always be better in certain areas of our life. And maybe we focus on one thing for a while and then we focus on another thing in a different season. But I think if we can keep that foundational belief and drive towards being our best, then it's obviously no guarantee that it'll happen, right? But we give ourselves the best chance of living a healthy life.
Why do you think people would choose any alternative? Why do you think people would choose a life that is more prone to illness rather than a life that's more prone to the benefits of being healthy? I think a lot of people in America, I would say most people in America, make super unhealthy decisions. I mean, you can see that from just like the obesity in the United States and all of the illnesses that we have, chronic illnesses. Why do people choose that path? Is it just because it's the path of kind of like laziness, or are they just not informed? What is your opinion on that?
I think it's a combination. I think most of the time it's not very intentional. As humans, we're really wired to take the path of least resistance. We are wired to conserve energy as much as possible for survival. Like, think of like back brain, right? Like really primitive survival type of instincts. We are wired to rest. We're wired to like conserve food and resources and energy, right? But in the world that we live in, we don't necessarily need to do that. Right? We have more resources than ever, more accessibility to food and water and shelter and different forms of safety than ever. And that is not equal across the board, though, right? It's not every single person has the same access as one another, but we still have more across the board than what our like primitive back brain is wired to believe, right? And so when you put those things together, it creates a system where it is incredibly easy to fall into these unhealthy cycles, because unconsciously or subconsciously we're thinking, I need to rest, I need to eat, because I don't know when my next meal is coming. But in the world we live in, that's not the case for our situation, right? Like, we, for the most part, have our next meal coming. For the most part, we have the ability to rest, or we have a source of income, or we have some sort of safety, right? And so when then you pair that with what you're saying, the lack of education around it, we end up just on this path of least resistance, and this path which ends up being a very unhealthy path. But it's not something that we're, for the most part, actively choosing. It's just what's laid out in front of us. And this is why I keep coming back to this purpose and this mission and wanting to help people, because if I can even just help educate one more person, help one more person, then that helps their loved ones and their family and their children and all of the people that are around them, which creates this ripple effect that we can't even see the final result of. But it helps them recognize that, oh, maybe I don't have to make choices just because they're the ones that are laid out in front of me. I can choose something different that will give me a better outcome.
How do you go about communicating that to people? Because people are typically stuck in their own ways and they don't want to be challenged. They kind of want to stay at a state of just doing their own thing, not really being challenged. They want to be comfortable, I guess is the way to put it. So you have a fitness company, you're a coach. How do you market yourself, I guess is the question here. How do you market health in a way that doesn't scare people off?
I feel like this is one of the hardest parts because there's so many people that can be helped, right? But we can't help them if they don't want to be helped. And I think understanding that and recognizing that is one of the most challenging things to do, but one of the most important things to do, right? So it took me a long time to realize that I can't do it for you. I can't be responsible for your results, and I can't force you to do anything, right? As someone who wants to help others, it's easy to get stuck in this trap of like, I'll do it for you. Like, I can help you. You can do it. But if they're not ready, they're not ready. And so there's different stages to promoting health and promoting people to make changes. So the first one is just awareness, right? So if I can put myself in front of people and just be myself, first of all, right? Like how I show up and act every day is the most important and most valuable thing that I can do. Like if I'm living differently than what I'm telling other people to do, then that's not helping anyone, right? So that's the first thing. And aside from like me just showing up in that way, I can create awareness. We have so many tools now through social media, right? I can create awareness. I feel like that's one thing that my articles do really well and the radio interviews do really well is it's just in front of you. It's something that you can see. And it creates a level of awareness around maybe something like you said you didn't know before, or, oh, that's interesting, or, oh, that's really annoying, but it's still in your mind, right? Like we're just creating this level of awareness. And then eventually people will start to go into this phase of like a pre-contemplation, right? A pre-contemplation phase where they're like, their interest is being piqued. They're thinking, maybe that sounds good, but they're not ready to take any action yet. And through more awareness, more education, more seeing different things, they'll move into like a contemplative phase where they're really close to wanting to take action, but not yet. And all this just comes through like awareness and education and putting information out there, right? And then once people are ready to take action, something has to click within them for them to be ready to take action, right? So once that happens, then I can present them with an offer, right? Then I can say, I have these specific things that might be able to help you. But when you put those offers in front of people who are not ready for them, it pushes them away even more. Right? It pushes them even further away because that's when we get into what you're talking about, this kind of like triggering state of saying like, I don't want to do this, or like I'm challenging them or something like that. Right. So it's kind of an art within the science, right? It's like a sales process science, right? But there's an art to it where you have to be able to meet people where they're at and you have to be empathetic with them. And you have to recognize that, like I said before, a lot of the choices, like quote unquote choices that they're making are not active choices that they're making. So it's going to take time for them to be able to recognize that they actually do have a choice in that matter. And this moment might not be the time when they recognize that or are ready to change it, right? So once we like build awareness, then if people are ready to take action, that's when it's important for me to recognize like who is the person that I want to help, and then what exactly do I do to help them so I can present it to them, and then they can move through that process and hopefully see some sort of result.
That's a great process. That's very holistic. Speaking of being holistic, actually, I know that your business revolves a lot around physical health, but can you speak to the importance of mental health and which comes first? It's kind of sometimes it's like the chicken or the egg kind of situation. Like maybe you work out and you work on your physical health and then it helps your mental health. Perhaps you work on your mental health and that helps with getting involved with making yourself physically better. Is there a formula for how one should go about wellness? And can you just speak to me about the benefits of improving one's mental health?
I don't even really have to say anything because you just said it so perfectly, but you're right on it. Something I really strongly believe in, and this kind of, I think, goes back to the purpose and what drives me. Part of it is this connection between mind and body. And I really strongly believe in the connection between mind and body. More and more science is coming out around it as well. And your mind can be the biggest, I guess, like benefit or downfall of your body, and vice versa, right? It works both ways. So I like to think about it like a cable, like a charger, some sort of data cord running between your brain and your gut. I really like to envision it kind of like going from my head into my stomach, because it's just an easy visual for me to like see the connection between the two of them, right? But what I like to imagine is that if one of them is struggling, let's say my mind is struggling today, right? I'm struggling to think positively. I'm struggling to take action. I'm procrastinating. Maybe I'm having very negative thoughts about myself or someone else, right? Maybe I'm feeling a sad, angry, any sort of emotion that we could deem as negative. I'm thinking back to that cord, right? I'm thinking back to that cord between my brain and my body. And I'm saying, my brain needs a little bit of help today. How can I use my body to help it? Right? What can I do with my body to help my brain? And what I found is that if I can take action in my body to help my brain, it kind of bypasses the thought process a little bit of like, I need to fix my brain, right? It's easier to see progress in my mental health when I focus on my physical health, because I'm not over focusing on fixing my mental state, right? I'm like, I'm feeling down. I'm going to get my physical body up and go for a walk, which then will help shift my mental state or workout or whatever type of movement I want to do in that moment, right? Or maybe it's even just a breathing exercise. But the opposite is true as well. And I have actually a pretty relevant example of this. I pulled my hamstring yesterday playing softball, and I pulled it last week too. And I took a week off and I rested, and I was like, I think I'm going to be good. I was running yesterday. I was like, I'm good to go. And then I hit the ball and I started running around the bases, and I pulled it again. And I was like, no, this is terrible. I'm really not good at being hurt. But anyway, so my hamstring is pulled. It's really swollen. It hurts. And that means that I can't exercise in the way that I want to, right? I can't go for a walk. I really need to rest it. And this is a time when I need to think about that cord again. And I need to say, okay, my body needs help right now. What can I do with my mind to help me maybe ease tension in my body, right? So this is when I'm going to go back to those tools that I know for my mental health. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's having a conversation with my best friend, maybe it is any other tool that I have in my toolbox that helps me with my mental health. If I can put energy there, it will settle me a little bit to allow me to rest my physical body, right? And I won't be so focused on my physical body because I'm putting effort in the other side of that cord. And I think that is the best way for me to explain like how I view that relationship and how I think that the two of them can work together to proactively help one another. I also think that not so proactively, like there just will be a natural reaction from the other one. So if I just get up and say, I'm going to go do my workout, there's going to be a natural reaction to my mental health, even if it's not intentional, right? And vice versa. If I am going to do a meditation, there's going to be a physical reaction of relaxation in my body, right? Even if it's not intentional. So I just think that it's so cool that we have the ability to influence both of those systems of our body with the other one, right? Like we don't have to put so much pressure on one. We can just like go do a little exercise with the other one, and it makes the other one so much better. I just think it's so cool.
I totally agree. It's very cool. You mentioned meditation. Meditation for me is a strong tool that really helps bring me into the present moment. And it's so important for us to inhabit that present moment, because the moment is really the only thing that we truly have. It's the present moment's what sustains us, and being present encourages this mental health that you're speaking of, and really begins the process of of healing. When you meditate, you begin to see what matters most in life, puts things in perspective. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you discovered meditation? Because for a lot of Americans, it's kind of a new idea. I mean, it's been around for forever around the world, specifically coming out of India. But in the United States, it's a relatively new phenomenon. It's a relatively new practice that people are really beginning to utilize. So, how did you arrive at meditation, and how has it become a useful tool in your life?
Yeah. Meditation for me, I very much fell into that category for a long time. Like, I didn't know anything about it. It was a foreign concept to me. I was like, you want me to stop thinking? That doesn't make any sense. Like, how is that even possible? So I very much relate to that because that was me. I came across meditation in that time of commuting back and forth to New York City. So that's when I first came across it, when I started listening to podcasts about personal development and business and different like sorts of fitness podcasts as well. I started listening to other people with a lot more education than me talk, and people that came up in conversation and things like that. And I started it probably right before I quit that job. So right before I started my business was when I started implementing meditation, and it was incredibly challenging for me. It was so challenging. I would fall asleep all the time. Like every time I tried to do it, I would fall asleep. And I'm just remembering now actually that I had one introduction to meditation before that. I was in college and I took an alternative medicine class, and they introduced it to us, and we had to do like one assignment around it, and same exact thing happened. I remember sitting on my floor. I was sitting leaned up against my dresser so I could like sit up tall with a little bit of support on my back, and I woke up like 45 minutes later just knocked out on the floor. I was like, I don't know if that's what was supposed to happen here, right? But what I learned is that I was pushing my body so hard that my body actually needed sleep in that moment. Like it almost wasn't capable of meditating when I started because it needed sleep so badly. And so I just want to say that if you try meditating and you fall asleep, it's okay. Like keep working on it. You're going to get there. Like it's okay. But it took me a really, really, really long time to feel anywhere near comfortable with sitting in stillness and being quiet with the inside of my mind. It was incredibly uncomfortable for a really long time after I stopped falling asleep. So once I could stay awake and actually pay attention to what was going on for a little bit, it was so challenging. It was so hard. It was uncomfortable. It was really confronting to sit in silence and have to try to pay attention to the thoughts that were happening in my brain. A lot of times our thoughts happen and we don't pay attention to them. And so they just keep repeating. And that's just like our normal life, right? That's just how we live. And we have these thoughts going on in our brain. But a lot of times they're really destructive, or they're really mean, or they're really sad, or they're perpetuating cycles that we don't like, right? And so meditation helped me start to see those, and it helped me start to recognize, kind of going back to those choices, that I had a choice of what I got to think, and I didn't have to kind of like play a victim to my thoughts, right? Like I didn't have to allow them to be whatever they were being. I actually had the ability to change them or look at them and say, that's interesting. Like that doesn't really sound like me. I wonder where that one came from, right? Or start to question them, or start to just get curious about the origin of them or how they were making me feel. And I'm saying this like it took like one session. It probably took like 500 sessions. Seriously, like it probably took 2.5 to 3 years of me being able to even just start to like look at them and become aware and not just be consumed by them. But it has been instrumental in me making so many changes in my life, including physical changes, because you don't realize how much your thoughts are holding you back from achieving your potential until you're able to start to recognize them at all.
How do you feel about the phrase, "you are not your thoughts"?
Do you experience like having multiple voices going on in your head? Do you experience that?
Yeah, there's kind of an internal dialogue of just ideas going one way and then going the other way. I would say that
Yeah.
there is definitely a dialogue.
Okay. I was curious because I heard recently that some people don't hear their own thoughts like in their own voice. And I was like, that's really weird. I can't imagine what that is like. But I experienced that. And I can hear these thoughts happening in my head. But then sometimes I can also hear a different voice that it's still my voice, but I know that it's different, kind of like either combating them or having a conversation or saying yes, no. Like there's just like two kind of like different conversations going on, like two different people, right? And so from that perspective, I can say that I do think that it's possible that we are not our thoughts, right? I do think it's possible that our thoughts are something that happen, that we have the ability to disconnect from to a certain extent through the lens of like observing them, right? We are able to observe them and see. I really like the visual of looking at our thoughts as like clouds passing by. That has been the most helpful like technique for me when it comes to meditation or any sort of like thought awareness. So I think that it's possible to see thoughts as like clouds passing by and you're like, huh, that's a weird shaped one. Like, didn't really expect that today. But at the same time, where are they coming from if they're not coming from us? So I think that it's like a dual relationship there where kind of like the mind body connection, the mind has the ability to influence the body has the ability to influence the mind. I think that it's a similar relationship between us as a whole and our thoughts. Like our thoughts have the ability to influence us and we also have the ability to influence them, but they're still stuck together by that cord. That's kind of how I look at it.
So a spiritual teacher, Ram Dass, he had well, it's not his idea, but popularized, at least in the United States, the idea of the witness. So exactly what you just said, there is this observer, that there are all these thoughts that move by. And I like the imagery you mentioned of clouds that are just passing by, but there still is that fundamental element that observes the thoughts itself. And that's what remains true no matter what. I mean, if we think about our lives physically, I mean, science has proven this over however many years, I think 5, 10, however many years, all of our cells are completely replaced as time goes on. So we're never truly the same physical person. And when it comes to our thoughts, we're constantly changing what thoughts we identify with every single day. I mean, what you're talking about as someone who's a coach, trying to go from a lifestyle that's not optimal to a more healthier lifestyle, and we're trying to go from point A to point B. But at the same time, this observer, this witness, is the only thing that constantly remains true. It remains this central thing that is truly us, I would say. That kind of brings us to the idea of spirituality, and we have to consider what our truest self is. I would say that witness, that observer that you speak of, is that true self. But what is your relationship with spirituality? We're talking about mind, body. A lot of times people talk about spirit as well, mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit. How do you relate that third feature into your coaching style?
I feel like this is the one I've had the most transformation with and the most change, I guess, like ups, downs, twists, turns, left, rights, like all over the place. So going back to kind of the origin story, I didn't grow up with really any talk of like religion, spirituality, anything like that. Both of my parents grew up in the Catholic Church, and neither of them really liked their experience. So they didn't want to kind of like force anything on me and my sister. And so they were very much like just allowing us to be free to make our own decisions when it came to it. Like if we wanted to go to church with our cousins, we were totally allowed to do that. And if we didn't want to go, we were totally allowed to do that too. Like there wasn't really any set story or guidelines or any sort of teaching around it. And that led me to just not understanding its existence at all. I think that's the best way for me to describe it. It was not that I understood it and rejected it. It was that I rejected it because I didn't understand it. And actually, when I started dating my now husband, his family is very religious, and we would have like lots of conversations around it because it was not something that I understood at all. And I didn't really understand that spirituality isn't necessarily religion. Like religion is a way. I kind of view religion as like one way to practice spirituality, right? So like each religion is kind of like its own guidebook as a way to practice spirituality, right? With some other things thrown in there too that maybe aren't related to spirituality, but I didn't understand any of those things, any of those relationships, associations. I didn't understand what you're talking about, this concept of the observer or our highest self or our truest self or a soul or anything that was kind of different from the body. Like I very much viewed physical health, mental health, emotional health, and like that was it. Like there was no spiritual health, there was no like spirituality at all. And then as I continued to learn more about same time of life, personal development, all of that stuff, is when I started to become introduced to the concept of spirituality. And it was incredibly triggering for me. It was incredibly hard for me to accept it, I think. Like it didn't make sense to me because it wasn't something I had ever learned or understood. So it was like this whole new concept. And I was like, wait a second, you're telling me there's a whole other part of my being that I don't even know exists? Like, this is crazy. I don't know if I can handle that. So when it comes to the like being triggered and not able to handle change, been there. Like, I totally get it. But now spirituality is really, really important to me. My spiritual health is really, really important to me. And I notice that if I am not doing a good job of prioritizing it, all of the other aspects of my health suffer. And it happens very quickly. Like you don't notice for a little while, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, like everything else is out of whack. And for me, when it comes to spirituality, I did end up like joining the religion that my husband grew up in, but I don't view that as the whole picture. I really very much view it as just one way to practice it. So we're Greek Orthodox, and it's a Christian religion, and it is supposedly like the oldest, most original form of Christianity. I truthfully don't know that much about it. But we practice that, right? Like I know the stories, I know the Bible, I know the teachings, I know all of that. And I very much believe that my spiritual health goes much deeper and wider than just one book or one outline or one format of teaching it. I really like to draw conclusions across different types of teachings and see where I can find similarities and see where I can find parts of my life that maybe relate to stories that I've heard across different teachings of spirituality. Kind of taking a holistic view of it, I think, is the way that I would like to describe it, which I feel like very much aligns with my view of health in general, is that if we get stuck in just one bucket or just just physical health, just mental health, just emotional health, just spiritual health, or even just one way of practicing those things, we're not setting ourselves up to really reach our optimal human performance or be able to optimize it. And so I like to take that approach with spirituality as well.
The Greek Orthodox religion, all these podcasts that you listen to, going down to the city, we all get different sources of inspiration that help fuel our journey. What are some other sources of inspiration? Are there any books? Are there any coaches that you had that really helped influence you?
I feel like I draw inspiration from all sorts of places. But one of the main ones, I'll probably I'm sure I'm going to think of more as I start to kind of talk about them, but the main teacher or like source of inspiration for me when it came to shifting into viewing health as more than just physical, right? And viewing all of it was Christine Hassler. So she is a spiritual psychologist, and I've read all of her books and listened to probably every single podcast episode that she has recorded. But she is someone who really helped me see those connections, I think, and recognize that I wasn't going to be able to be healthy if I didn't focus on other areas of my life. And that was really like one of the first introductions to those sides of health. And I think I carry the lessons that I've learned through listening to her into how I coach now. I also have lots of different sources of inspiration for when it comes to things like winning or team building or success. Probably every athletic, like sports coach I've ever had has played a role in some ways. One of them in particular was the head coach at Ithaca of the men's basketball team. He is a huge source of inspiration for me, especially in the way that I coach teams and especially in how much he cared for each person that was on his team. And I think the biggest thing that he taught me was that nothing matters if you don't care for the person as a whole. And their success, their accomplishments, what you accomplish together, how many games you win. None of it matters if you don't get to know that person and if you don't care for them and show them that you love them no matter what the outcome is. And so I think that is another really big source of inspiration as like who I want to be as a coach. And I think when it comes to like very much the physical side of health, I am very inspired by people that teach functional fitness. So what that means to me is working on your physical body in ways that allow you to actually use it. Right. So I think having muscles that look big and look strong are cool, but I very much like to be able to use my body. Right. And I think that's one thing that carries over into my clients as well is I don't want you to just look healthy. I don't want you to just look strong. I want you to actually be healthy and be strong. And I want you to be able to take action on all of, your wishes and your desires. And I want you to be able to pick up your kids and your grandkids and run around with them. And I want you to be able to live life, right? And so pretty much everyone and anyone that talks about those types of things is really inspirational to me because I don't think how it looks on the outside is enough.
We're talking about inspiration. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about spirituality. It's great talking about all of this stuff, but actually putting things into practice is a whole nother kind of thing. So I'm curious, what does your daily routine look like? How do you inhabit all of these ideas that you're talking about here? How do you make them tangible and use them to better your life?
I love that you asked it because I agree. Like a lot of times, especially if you're listening to a podcast, it's very theoretical or conceptual. And you're like, okay, so now what do I actually do? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you make this work? Right. That's so important. So I want to start off by saying that my routine changes often, especially as like my seasons of life change. Right. So I actually am in a transition period right now. And so what was working well for me just recently isn't quite working as well for me right now. So I'm in that transition phase. And that's the first thing I want to say is that if you expect it to be the same every day for the rest of your life, it's not going to work. Right? Like you might have long periods of time where your routine might remain the same, but for the most part, it's going to change. And we have to accept that and change when we need to, because that's the only way that we can actually continue moving toward health. Right? So some things that are really important for me that I don't do them in a specific order at this moment, but there are certain things that I make sure that I do. One is I make sure that I take all of my necessary supplements that I need to take. So that I work with different healthcare providers to help me with that. That's not something that I just like try to decide on my own, right? I have had blood work done, and depending on what my goals are and whatnot, I figure out what supplements I need to take. And I try to be as consistent as possible with them. Because if they make my body feel better, then that's important, right? And when my body feels better, my brain feels better. We go through that whole thing again that we just talked about. So that's one that's really important to me. Drinking a lot of water is very important to me. It's very challenging, but it's something that I prioritize because I feel better when I do it. So for me, that's usually around like 90 to 100 ounces per day. I'm a pretty small human. So like Cause, my husband, he'll go through that before noon. But for me, like that's good for the whole day. So that's another one that's really important to me. Meditation also is really important to me. So that can look different from day to day. Sometimes I'm doing like a longer guided meditation because I have the time and space to be able to do it. But that's not most of the time. Most of the time I'm doing a short guided meditation, and occasionally I will do some sort of like unguided meditation or just like intentional breathing practice. But it's just some sort of intentional time to make that connection that we were talking about before, right? Between the mind and the body. So that's something that's important to me. I have not been doing this. Well, I have. Journaling is important to me for my mental health. So right now I'm using a journal called the 5-minute journal. And I really like it because it can be done in 5 minutes. And it's just a couple of prompts for the morning and a couple of prompts for the nighttime. And I was going to say that I haven't been doing that consistently, but I have been doing that consistently for months. But I'll go through different seasons. So like right now I'm doing the 5-minute journal because I wanted like that quick hit of doing it, but I'm actually in a transition right now of wanting to move back towards like long form journaling because I feel like I just have more to get out. And so it's okay if I go back and forth between those things. Other things include exercise. So strength training is really important to me. It does not take very long. I'm usually done between 30 to 45 minutes, and I don't do it every day. But a couple times a week, I need to do that because I like my body to be strong and I feel better all across the board when I do it. Walking is very important to me. That is something I try to do every day. Now I can't because I pulled my hamstring, but I will be back out there as soon as I possibly can. And just getting out in nature and looking at green things is really great. If you have green things near you, I can encourage you to go out and look at them. That's really helpful. And then two more things that come to mind. I do have a therapist. I do therapy every other week. That has been really helpful for me because sometimes you just need someone else who's trained to help you work through things that are going on. And this is the one that I have not been good at recently, but I know that I need to be better at it is sleep. Sleep. I try to aim for 8 hours at least. I work better with more sleep. Lately, I've been going to bed way too late, but if I can get to bed a little bit earlier more consistently, that helps me feel better throughout the day. So that might sound really overwhelming. like a long list of things. And so I guess the last disclaimer I want to say about it is that it took me a long time to build up to all of those things, right? So I wouldn't say if you're someone listening and you're saying, oh my God, I don't do any of those things, now I need to do all of them. No, maybe just pick one. Right? Just pick one that feels exciting to you, not the one that you feel like you should do and feels daunting, but the one that feels exciting. I would start with that one because that's where you're going to actually see the most change because you're going to want to do it.
So we're talking about changes in this podcast. Really, just our entire lives are this dynamic process from beginning to end. There's just changes going on the entire time. We're talking about witness consciousness and observer as well. And that's really the only thing that remains constant. But otherwise, everything is changing all the time, including routines. And so you were talking about how back in, I even hesitate to say early life because you said you're only 29, but back a few years ago when you were commuting to New York City, you were down there, you were living a city life, then you came back up here, you're living more of a rural life now. What is the difference like between those two environments, where one where you're constantly gotta go with urban life, it's just so fast paced, it almost seems like you can't fit in all the practices and all the routines that you'd like to fit in to help better yourself. How does that kind of living compare to the living that you're at now, the state that you're at now, living in a more rural kind of life? Does the setting of where you live, does that play an important role in your development?
I definitely think that it does, because I think that our environment plays a huge role on not only who we are, but like how we are able to be that person, right? And like what's going on around us and our influences and whatnot. When I was commuting into the city every day, I feel like there were a lot of reasons for this, but my cortisol levels were through the roof all the time. Like stress was really high, right? And there were a lot of reasons for that, but I think just like the pace of it was constantly going on around me. And no matter what I did on the inside, I couldn't escape that on the outside, right? And I think that what we do on the inside obviously is really important for our health. And we cannot deny that what's going on the outside also impacts us, right? So all of the things that I've listed off, I pretty much was doing all of them in some capacity at that time, but the outcome of my health was much different because of the different levels of stress that were being placed on my body physically, and also the stress of my job, right? And like the lifestyle factors and the commuting and all that. So we can't deny that what's going on around us impacts our health. It absolutely does. And that is something that, for me, being in the city was not great for my health. I don't think that that's the same for every person. I do think that some people may be different and they might really enjoy that type of living, where for me, it was not good for me and my health goals and my body and all of that. So being back in a rural setting pretty much all the time has been really good for me in terms of my stress levels, because I have a little bit more control over how frantic my life is, right? Because what's going on around me isn't constantly at such a high pace. And so that has really helped me take my health to the next level as I've removed myself from that environment. And when I was commuting to the city and working in the city, there was a big decrease in my health at that time. So, but like I said, I don't really know if that's universal for everyone, but that was my experience, right? I think that when we have so much going on around us, it forces us to have to be even more intentional about what we're doing for ourselves, right? And like what kind of space we curate, and getting really clear on what we want our life to look like and what our health goals even are. What are my priorities? What are my intentions, right? And that is really challenging. And that's not something to be taken lightly, right? I don't think that we should just say, oh, like you could do it just like me. Everyone's experience is going to be different depending on where they live, where they work, how many responsibilities they have. Do you have kids? Do you not have kids? Like all of these things, right? And so when I was at that time of life, the way that I did these practices looked incredibly different, right? So now when I go outside for a walk and I walk out of my front door, I'm walking on a dirt road completely covered in trees with wildlife everywhere. You can hear the birds. Sometimes you just see a deer walking in front of you. It's very peaceful. It is very relaxing. But when I was in the city, I would go for a walk on my lunch break, and I'm walking out of a building very close to Times Square. I worked between Times Square and the Empire State Building, kind of like right in the middle. And so no matter which direction you walk, it is absolute madness at all times of the day. There's so much noise, so many people. If you're not walking a certain speed, you're probably going to get run over, right? So the relaxation levels of the walk were very different, right? So I'm still doing this practice to try to better my health, but the results that I'm getting are very different. And there really wasn't anything I could do about that, right? It was a product of the environment that I was in. And so I do think it's important that we take those things into consideration and recognize that they are real factors, and at the same time, still do the best that we can do to move towards whatever level of health we aim to be at.
To someone that's listening to this episode and they want to start to make positive changes in their life for their physical health or mental health, and they're interested in what you're talking about here, what does it look like to be a client of yours? What does it look like? Like, what kind of programs do you put together as a coach? And how do you work with people directly on helping benefit their lives?
I will say this is in a huge transition right now. So at this moment, I don't have any offers. Like at this exact moment of this recording, I've been going through a big transition of how I can help as many people as possible without burning myself out, because that is a cycle for me personally. Like something I struggle with is like just wanting to help everyone all the time. And then I end up with nothing left to give, and that doesn't help anyone, right? So I will talk about what's coming because I'm really excited about it. And hopefully when people are listening to this, we'll be closer to having it rolled out. So what I am working on is a workout membership app, essentially. So that's what I want to start with, is providing workouts to people that help them essentially do all the things that we've been talking about, right? But that for people who want their bodies to be functional, for people who want their workouts to be effective and efficient, right? So we don't want to spend tons of time in the gym or working out at home. They want to not only look strong, but feel strong, most importantly, right? They want their physical health to positively impact the other areas of their life. They want to be around people who are focusing on those same things, right? So the goal is to create a program that will give you those physical workouts, right? The actual tangible, like here's the video of how to do the thing, how many reps, how many sets, in what order, all of that, right? But also the support and community around you to help you actually do it, right? Because this program will be for someone who wants to work out on their own. Like this is not like a live or online, but like at a certain time type of program, right? Like you have an app on your phone and you can do the workout whenever you want. So you kind of have to be a self-starter in that way, right? You have to want to take action on it. But I don't expect you to just be able to do everything on your own, right? So you will have access to me for support in some ways and to the other people in the group as well. So that is the main thing that I am very actively working on at this moment to be able to roll out again for fitness coaching.
So goals, goals, goals. Building out this program, building out this app. That's a very ambitious goal, and it's going to be great to actually see that come together. Depending on how it materializes, however it may materialize. But what are some other goals in your life that you're really aspiring for?
Ooh, these are fun questions. Well, they're all fun questions, but I like goals and what we're working towards. Okay, so I'm a little bit all over the place with my goals, but I'm sure as I talk about them, they won't seem as all over the place. But that is very much one of them. So, kind of like reviving the fitness coaching, essentially, because I have been writing my articles and doing like that education and awareness piece that we've talked about, but I haven't been doing a lot of fitness coaching recently. So, reviving that this year. And I have a goal to help as many people as possible. So I used to do this really small, right? I used to be like, oh, yay, I have 10 clients and they're all my friends. And I love that. Like, I love that the people close to me trust me to help them. And now I want to help them and everyone else. So that is a really big goal for me, is to not only do this program well, but to make it really big. So that is one goal. Another goal for me right now, my husband, Cosmos, and I, we have a couple other companies together as well. And so growing those companies is something that is a goal of mine, but not just to scale, right? I don't want them just to be bigger. I want them to be bigger so that way we can have more employees and we can help people build their lives and their livelihoods. And that is something I love. I love to see people succeed in work that they're passionate about. So that is another one that we're working on. For my own health, a goal for me right now, well, very short term, is to heal my hamstring. My goodness. But aside from that, for my health goals right now, I am actively working on my hormone health. Has been a big focus for me over the last year or so. Like, really specifically, I'd been working on it for a couple of years, but over the last year, it's been like my number one main focus. So continuing working on that has been a big goal for me. And that comes with a lot of like paying attention to what I'm eating and stress levels and intensity of things and whatnot. So that is one. And then another like life related goal for me is we built the house that we currently live in, but I want to build our like forever home. So that is something that I'm starting to think about. And we really want to live on a big farm with blueberries in perfectly curated rows that'll kind of look like a vineyard. That is our goal, and that's where we want our like home base, like our family home to be. So that is something that I'm starting to think more about and trying to bring into reality more and more.
What are some things that make you happy in life?
Number one, my dogs. I love them. I have 5 very big dogs and I love them so much. They make me so happy. Helping people and seeing people happy or excited when they notice a change in themselves. That just like lights me up more than anything. I think my family and my friends and getting to spend time with them makes me really happy. I really like deep relationships and curating deep relationships with people. So getting to interact with those people that I really care about makes me happy. And just like a really great workout, honestly, like how I feel after doing something really hard in particular, there's no feeling like accomplishing something physically that you weren't sure you could do, like a really heavy deadlift or winning a game or scoring the game winning goal or anything like that. Those things, that brings me a lot of joy.
Well, Maggie, we're getting towards the end of the interview now. Is there anything that you wanted to discuss that we didn't get around to discussing so far?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if there's anything else that we possibly could discuss. We went everywhere. I don't think so. I feel like we covered it all.
Awesome. Well, Maggie, I appreciate your time here today. I know this is a very all-encompassing interview. I want these interviews to be people's why interviews. I want to be able to provide a forum so that people can really talk about their lives and talk about what really inspires them. And so I'm very happy that you're here today. You're talking about who you are, the practices that help build you up, and the practices and the programs that you're developing for other people to help encourage wellness in people's lives. And I think that's a very admirable goal, a very admirable mission in life, purpose in life, to help bring health and wellness to people all around you. So that's fantastic. And so I just really want to thank you again for being here today, and hope you have a good day. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you so much for having me. This was lovely. I really enjoyed it.